Okay, here we are.
Hi, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Iyad.
And I'm Emmanuel. And this is your Federation X podcast.
That's it.
Yeah.
So let's talk today about what on earth is happening with the Israeli government.
Well, we're in dire straits. I think that the government has been formed with a Knesset majority of 64 votes out of 120. It's a very right-wing construct, which has set its goals on basically changing the system of government in Israel. They don't call it that. They call it changing the legal system or improving the legal. They're talking about reforming the legal system. But what they're really talking about is emasculating the legal system and basically canceling the ability of the Supreme Court to overrule the government on critical issues. And that's pretty much, we're looking at a Hungary-like situation where we're going to an authoritarian government.
So but that's a religious authoritarian government.
It's a religious authoritarian government, which makes it even worse. There's like two parallel tracks. There's the secular track, which is trying to break up the legal system, and the religious track is trying to legislate all kinds of religious laws which make life more difficult for the secular population and give Israel a more religious daily life.
So secular Jews will have less rights.
Secular Jews will have more. I don't know whether they'll have less rights, but they'll have. There will be limitations on certain things, like opening hours for public swimming pools will be more restrictive because they will have to be given some for women only, some for men only, so there won't be much left for mixed. It's a crazy situation. It's like Iran all over again. That's what it appears to some people.
Yeah. So the distribution of rights, I'll be nice using my words, will be to the view of the religious Jews equal amongst all Jews and least towards the Palestinians.
Well, the main thing, I think the main aim of breaking up the legal system is to make sure that it will be possible to differentiate between segments of the population and treat them unequally. Not that it isn't happening now, but presently the discrimination is not much beyond regular discrimination you have in other democratic countries. Also, there's very little legal discrimination, very little one, but the changes that the government wants to impose are changes which will basically make it possible for the government to say these people will get less rights, these people get more rights, and these people will get no rights on certain issues. Okay. It's already started that with the nation-state law, but that's going even further, and the Supreme Court will not be in a position to protect the minorities. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of very strange things happening.
So as it is, can a Palestinian, for example, buy a house next to you in Tel Aviv or wherever you live?
Theoretically, yes. Practically, probably not. Okay. Again, the situation is first of all, the moment, let's say a guy decides he wants to sell his house to a Palestinian, and this becomes public knowledge, the whole world will come down on him and say, hey, and then there will be others who offer more. It'll be very difficult for Palestinians. It's very difficult for them to rent, okay? Although legally, it's possible. There were court cases which were won by Palestinians, and the Palestinians do live as neighbors in Israeli towns and villages, and they're mixed towns. So it's not it's definitely not apartheid within Israel. Okay, it's a difficult situation with a lot of discrimination. Some of it systematic, some of it personal. But it's again legally, it's not legal at this time, but it may become legal.
Yeah.
Well, if Palestinians do get less and less and less power within the Israeli government, then
In the political system, yeah.
in the political system, then their rights within the country could erode.
Yes,
Then what?
Their rights within Israel proper could erode.
Yes, they are eroding. I mean, the fact that they're now going against the Arab Palestinian members of the Knesset, trying to limit their participation is very problematic.
So the point is obviously that there's degrees of discrimination, right?
Yeah.
And those degrees depend on where you live and which country you're a citizen of, etc.
Yeah.
And whether you're Jewish or Palestinian,
Yeah.
right? I can't bring myself to differentiating Christian or Muslim Palestinian. And there's no other word for Jewish because it's a religion and citizenship now, right?
Yes.
So, and you can see that even in the demonstrations that are happening. They're happening at the exclusion of the Palestinians. So
I don't think it's not an exclusion. First of all, Palestinians do participate in some locations. In Haifa and in some mixed cities, Palestinians participate, but they're not
restricted.
They're not restricted. But what do you mean?
The flags they are.
That's that's an issue which came up. Actually, there have been Palestinian flags in some locations, but it's kind of it's just something something that's problematic. The fact that Palestinians can't, wave the Palestinian flag without inviting trouble is an example of the discrimination that has become more prevalent. It didn't used to be that way.
And isn't the flavor of the demonstrations not about resolving the overall issue, which includes the Palestinian issue, but it's about resolving democracy in Israel between Jews and Jews? No.
It's got nothing to do with resolving the overall issue. It's only resolving the democracy issue, and it ignores completely the fact that we've been living with a not exactly democratic occupation for 55 years. Okay, so it's like most Israelis completely accept the occupation as a given, and as if it has nothing to do with democracy. Okay,
yeah.
So that is just it's not part of the present discussion, and actually efforts are being made to keep it out, because there'll be more people at the demo if it's kept out. The moment you bring in, if you have too many Palestinian flags or too many, stop the occupation signs, you're going to have less people at the demo, and we don't want less people at the demo at this time.
Yeah. So the demonstrations, to me, are about we Jews don't want our freedoms tampered with, but we're happy with the status quo with the Palestinians. We want their freedoms limited to the way they are.
No, it's not that we're happy with the way things are. We're willing to leave it at that. That's it. It's not people aren't happy about the occupation. They just don't think of it. They ignore it. Okay. So it's not, it's a non-issue as long as everything is quiet. Okay. The moment things start to heat up, all of a sudden, you know, people start to get worried. But as long as things are quiet, ignorance is bliss. Okay, it's just not an issue.
Right. So, what do you think the future is going to bring in Israel?
Well,
Short-term future.
the short term, if we don't manage to prevent the legislation from going through, and I'm talking about primarily two legislations which are critical. One of them is the override clause, which will make it impossible for the Supreme Court to overrule the government on particular legislation. So the government will always have the last say. If that legislation passes, that's a real problem. And the other real problem is the committee for the election of judges, which presently is a very balanced committee where there are people from the public, there are people from politics, there are people from the judges, from the legal profession, but in a balanced composition. And the government wants to make a committee which has a large majority of politicians, which basically would mean that the judges would be voted in by politicians, and that's a catastrophe, because if the judges are picked by politicians, you know, that's the worst pretty much that can be. And we don't, as long as we don't have a constitution. So those two legislations, if they go through, we are basically finished for a long time. It's going to take a long time to get, you know, to recover from that, if at all. So every effort has to be made to prevent the legislation from happening, and that can only be done by public protests. There's not much else we can do.
So if the politicians pick a judge,
yeah,
right, and I'm purposely just simplifying things.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference to a court case between a Jew and a Jew? And what would the difference be in a court case between a Jew and a Palestinian?
No, the difference would mainly be on issues of between, you know, between left right, on political issues. You know, once the judges are politicized, the judges' decisions will be politicized, and if they're politicized, the Palestinians will have even less rights, and Jews will have more rights, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the whole idea.
And if you're left-leaning, you might lose your court case.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're left-leaning, you're right. There's no doubt about it. Okay, you can't count on the judges being fair because they're political. So that's an impossible situation.
And what's the main purpose of the override clause? Do we know what policies they're planning on bringing in?
I think no. The override clause is the Supreme Court is the guarantor of equality and of protection to minorities, and against the Supreme Court can put the government in its place based on the law. Okay. Now the moment there's an override clause, that's gone. Let's say a typical case, for example, the government wanted to legislate a law which makes it possible to put illegal immigrants into custody for 3 years without trial. Okay, if you're illegal and they catch you, you can be put into jail for 3 years. So the Supreme Court said that that's not reasonable. Okay, so they had to re-legislate, and then they finally gave it up. If there's an override clause, it's a done deal. Okay, the Supreme Court goes against it, they do the override, finished. Okay, and that goes against everything, anything.
Or another extreme case is if the settlers want to have a settlement in Ramallah or Bethlehem or Nablus, right? The
Yeah,
Supreme
well,
Court could say this is legal.
Yeah, for example, with the arrangement law, which basically was overruled by the Supreme Court. It was cancelled by the Supreme Court, where the government wanted to be able to nationalize areas, Palestinian areas, which were privately owned for commercial use. Okay, now it's possible in the territories you can nationalize territories for public use, okay, for public use by everybody. That's reasonable. But for private use, that's like, somebody comes to takes you back your garden away from you and says, I'm giving it to the neighbor, he pays me more, okay? That's completely ridiculous. And that clause was negated by the Supreme Court. And if this government goes through with the program, sky's the limit. Just no limit on the government's ability to do whatever it wants, and that's scary.
So, what's this government's view if there's a mass exodus of center and left-leaning Jews from?
I think. I don't think it hit. They don't comprehend what's going to happen. First of all, on one side, they're going to say, "Let them go." Whoever does, they have this. If they want to go. If they don't love Israel, we love Israel more. Patriots, blah blah blah. They're not going to feel bad about it until they see the taxes go down. Okay, and then they'll go down big time. Also, because everybody's already talking about the fact that investment in Israel is going to decline, and the governor of the Bank of Israel already told Netanyahu that this is going to, it's going to be coming down. Investment is coming down, and the previous governors of the Bank of Israel have already talked about it. So the media are full of warnings. Okay, now for the time being, everybody's ignoring the warnings, but there may be impending decisions by the rating agencies, the Standard and Poor and everything like that. They also have everybody put on notice already that the legal things planned may move Israel lower on the rating scale, and that will have an impact on our debt. On the rates we're paying on debt, and that will have an impact on the government budget, and that will have an impact on everybody. So
do you think that the backers of Israel will be able to get enough of the people to break from the coalition before it's too late?
There's no indication that there's anybody in the coalition who is wavering at this time. None whatsoever. That doesn't mean it's not happening. There are people working behind the scenes. Gideon Saar, who was part of Likud in the previous, in several previous governments, and who is now on his own party. He's probably working or trying to get some people, but it's difficult to, you have to convince 5 people to bring this coalition down. And that's not an easy feat, okay? That's not an easy feat, and I'm not sure what's easier, to keep the public protesting at a very, ever expanding rate, or try to somehow get those, 4 members of the coalition to break their way, 4 or 5, I mean. So I have no idea. We're going to see that
it all seems to be very planned, right?
What?
So it all seems to be very, very much planned. I don't think anything that's happening is ad hoc.
For the government, by the government, you mean?
Yes.
No, that's been planned, and they planned it very well and a long time ago.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And now they're planning to censor. Or I'm hearing they're planning to censor the newspapers. So
I haven't said what particular they talked about some kind of not being able to publish private conversations and things like that. And generally they're talking about taking action against the media. They don't want public. They don't want publicly owned media. They want privately owned media. So they're going against Israel's National Broadcasting Service. That's already on record. The Minister of Communications already said he wants to shut it down, not less. For the time being, he only wants to cut the budget by half, but the rest will be coming. And there's legislation against publishing private conversations of politicians. So it's beginning to go through that. Things are happening also in the media.
What I'm imagining, I mean, I haven't read the articles, but I believe there's an article in Haaretz and an article in J-Post.
Okay. I'll look for it.
Media censorship.
Yeah.
But what you'd think is the less that all these issues are brandished in public, then the public would be none the wiser and the demonstrations would be smaller and smaller and less. And same with the outside world. The more that Israel is insular and not airing its dirty laundry in the newspapers, then they're more free to subvert and do whatever it is that they want to do.
Well, it's going to be very difficult to shut Israelis down. I mean, they can do censorship, here and there, but unless they start to getting really restrictive and they're starting to crack down on the social media, we're going to publish whatever has to be published. But the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, and then there are always people who don't have access to all the media. All the religion, not all the religious people have access to the media by choice. Okay, so they just take what they're being fed by the government, and so that's going to make the situation long term even worse. If the news are limited and restricted, then the people will only do what they hear from the government.
So what are the chances of this government entrenching itself so it can't be voted out in the next election?
I think that the next election will be the one which will just that'll be it. Okay, if the next election, if the government will not fall, if it'll be possible to create that coalition again after the next elections, Israel's finished for decades. I think. I don't think that there's no recovery from this.
Do you think they have a plan where they can bring in some form of, I don't know, call it martial law, or create a deep and entrenched war with the Palestinians?
There's no need for martial law in Israel. We have the emergency regulations from the British Mandate are still in force. So there's nothing you cannot do in the public sphere which is not covered by law. Okay, so you can make people disappear, and you can you name it, it's possible. Okay, it's just that as long as the Supreme Court is around, that there's somebody who is an open eye on things, and you can also go to the Supreme Court if you discover something which you think is really bad, and appeal to the Supreme Court, which is also one thing they want to do, restrict now, the ability to appeal to the Supreme Court. Right now, it's very, very liberal. So basically, anybody can appeal to the Supreme Court, even if he's not personally affected by whatever he's appealing against, okay? But if you do it, then only if the person who is affected can also appeal, you cut down on a whole lot of possibilities there. So this is pretty bad.
Well, should we stop it here, or do you want to keep going?
No, I think we covered pretty much what there is to cover at this time.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens next time we meet. Hope there will be some positive news.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts.
Okay.
And let's just hope there is positive news.